Hello, welcome to EyE on You.
Eunice, as you know, the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macao Greater Bay Area is now a hot topic. The Greater Bay Area, made up of 9 cities in the Guangdong province, together with Hong Kong and Macau, is the largest and most populated Bay Area in the world. The other 4 Bay Areas we are talking about are in San Francisco, New York, London, and Japan.
Yes, Edward, Hong Kong, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen have dominated for the region for decades with the highest GDP and economic growth. According to the outline of the country's 14 5-year plan, China will promote the construction of the Guangdong, Hong Kong, and Macau Greater Bay Area in an active and prudent way. Over the past few years, our central government and Hong Kong government has formulated and improved policies and measures as to make it more convenient for people to work in mainland China, as to empower Hong Kong residents living, working, and studying in the mainland China, fostering the flow of people, goods, capital, and information, and to improving the overall connectivity of the Greater Bay Area under the principle of one country, two systems. Edward, there have been a lot of misunderstanding of the Greater Bay Area, the plan. And as I know that you have been working there for more than a decade, can you share some views and your experience in the Greater Bay Area?
Sure, Eunice. Now, if we compare to the time when I first entered mainland China for business 10 years ago, it is so much more blessed for Hong Kong people nowadays if they have plans for starting a career there. Hong Kong people get extra subsidies from the mainland government if they are going to start a business at designated incubators. They get housing allowance, they get tax credits, they get transportation allowance, and office space rental allowance. Meanwhile, the Hong Kong government is also offering a series of early stage supports for the Hong Kong people who are planning to start a business at the Greater Bay Area mainland cities. For example, financial subsidies and incubation services. This can help us more well-equipped before entering the Greater Bay Area mainland cities. It is quite an exciting time for us Hong Kongers. So Eunice, how about you and your profession? What kinds of opportunities will the Greater Bay Area offer to legal professionals?
Yes, I see that there are more opportunity for our profession and for the legal industry. For example, Hong Kong enterprise who register in Shanghai, Shenzhen, they can choose the law, applicable law. Hong Kong is an applicable law for their contracts for businesses. And also, Hong Kong lawyers can register for the special exam, so they can be qualified as a PRC lawyer in the Greater Bay Area. And this means that businesses have the option. They are able to secure a lawyer who are both Hong Kong and PRC registered lawyer, so they can advise them on their legal transactions, on the investment and commercial transactions. So this is only the benefit what the Hong Kong lawyers can have. And also, we are talking about the youth. The Greater Bay Area Youth Employment Scheme is one of the new measures announced by the CE in the 2020 policy address. And it aims to encourage and to support young people to work and to pursue the career in the mainland of the Greater Bay Area, and to help them understand the latest development of Hong Kong and those other cities, and to leverage their opportunity for the career advancement in the Greater Bay Area.
Yes, Eunice. So to sum up, either running a business or developing a career, the Greater Bay Area has a thriving economy that deserves Hong Kong youths to explore and develop. In this episode, we have invited Mr. Eric Fok Kai-shan to be our guest. He holds key position in the family business, and he is also a committee member of the Guangdong CPPCC. He is the vice chairman of the Hong Kong Football Association, and he sits on the executive committee of the Asian Football Federation. I'm sure that he has a lot to share with us.
Yes, please invite him in.
Yes. Hello, Eric. Welcome to our show. What do you think about the younger generation of Hong Kong can expect from the Greater Bay Area, this whole new concept? And can you share with us your experience at the Greater Bay Area? For example, what kind of challenges you have encountered at the Greater Bay Area?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Edward and Eunice for inviting me today to share some of my concept on Greater Bay Area and also football. Answering your question, I think that I've always been very involved in mainland. I think first of all through my interaction with my business side of things, but over the last few years I've been more involved on helping the Hong Kong youth and helping them to understand more about the development of China, especially the Greater Bay Area initiation. For myself, I think it's simple. For the Hong Kong youth, they have a full of opportunity. With the Greater Bay Area, there's going to be greater interaction between the 9 mainland cities and the 2 special administration regions, which includes Hong Kong and Macau. With that said, I think that the Bay Area's positioning is to position this Bay Area to be a high-tech hub, to allow Hong Kong youth to benefit of the greater market. So with that said, I think that I've been trying to facilitate youth from both sides. At the same time, what we see is that for the last 3 years, I've actually conducted a Greater Bay Area youth report based on Hong Kong youth. And the findings itself is actually very interesting. And for the last 3 years, what we have found is that, first of all, many youth in Hong Kong has heard more about the Greater Area, but at the same time, they don't understand too much of the details. So I think, first of all, it's most important to let them understand the actual opportunities that they have in terms of policies and in terms of the so-called innovation hubs that can assist them with their career path. So I think this is the #1 area that we have to tackle. And secondly, in terms of problem you mentioned, I think of course we all hear about there's going to be cultural difference, but it's more about how do we facilitate that. And in terms of the cultural difference, I think it's important to increase the interaction and exchange. So over the last few years, we have conducted many internships in terms of short-term tours, but more importantly, with the pursuit of many universities opening across the border, we feel that there will be more interaction from younger age. And with that said, that would facilitate the so-called the greater interaction of the Greater Bay Area for Hong Kong youth.
Yes, as the whole idea for the Greater Bay Area is to create the synergies between different cities in the area.
That's right.
So as what you said just now, you have a survey report made for the, what the youth sees the Greater Bay Area.
Right.
Then what is the report's finding on their feelings on the Greater Bay Area?
Well, I think from the report, 86% of the Hong Kong youth have heard about the Greater Bay Area, but they would like to know more about the exact policies and how they can participate and how they can benefit. And I think that's the key. And with that said, I think how they can benefit, actually there is many so-called funding schemes right now. I think 10 years ago, many people would talk about career path. But in the last 10 years, I think many youth want to pursue their dream. And I think Greater Bay Area is an area where they can pursue their dream in terms of many youth want to do startups. And I think with startup, people always consider about market opportunity and cost. And I think Greater Bay Area allows you to have a limitless market, but where costs can be kept at a lower side compared to Hong Kong. So I think this is an obvious choice. But with that said, I think it's a confidence issue. Is they want to feel confident going in. So I think that with the confidence issue, I think that we have to spread more message, meaning, for example, a funding scheme from Hong Kong. From the Hong Kong government, there's the Young Development Fund from the YDC, Cyberport funding. There's actually a lot of government initiative that actually helps Hong Kong youth to go into the Greater Bay Area. At the same time, in the Greater Bay Area, mainland 9 cities, there's also lots of local funding policies, initiation. And I think many of these so-called policies has to be rallied to people in Hong Kong so they know about it. Going forward, I think in terms of confidence, this is also one of the so-called suggestions that we made through our survey, is that we would like to suggest that in Guangdong right now, they've already have something called the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office. One of our suggestions is how do you upgrade the resources and the function of this office? Then it has to be a Hong Kong government-led office that can ensure their safety, especially for the parents, allowing the sons and daughters to go across the border. So this suggestion is something that we have suggested to the government, and also we'd like to share with the community. And hopefully, by doing so, this could give more confidence to parents and youth, and that would encourage them to take advantage of the current market and policies that's available to them. And hopefully, with that, they can help enable Hong Kong youth to increase their horizon across the border and so-called pursue their dream.
At least you let them to prepare themselves on the cultural difference. I think the government needs to do more on this issue rather than just saying, persuading or encouraging them to go to the Greater Bay Area, but not giving them much of the support. I think this is what you were
exactly,
talking
because
about.
I think there's a lot of funding scheme to encourage them, but what I look at is more important. Once they're there, you need to look after them, and I think there's a lot of initiative telling them to go.
Correct.
But a lot of them will be asking the question, when I'm there, then who looks after me if I'm in trouble? And they may not be so familiar with the local government, with local community as they're new. So I think that Hong Kong government can play a greater role in terms of facilitating and supporting them.
Yes, Eric. So as the Vice Chairman of the Hong Kong Football Association, how do you see the future of the football industry in Hong Kong? And how do you think we can collaborate more with the Greater Bay Area through sports?
Well, I think that sports is a universal language. It really connects people around the world. Actually, a few years ago, we just celebrated our 40th anniversary of the Guangdong Hong Kong Football Cup. This was conducted before the handover, and I think the whole idea was how do we, through sports, promote more interaction between the cross-border activity. This was the first time when people from Hong Kong and Mainland interacted through a football game. And this shows how football can connect people.
Right.
I think that we can play different roles by using sports. I think on the amateur level, on the youth level, I have last few years organized the Greater Bay Area Youth Football Tournament. So this is working with the Hong Kong 18 district teams and then playing it in Hong Kong, having a knockout, and then the winners will be representing Hong Kong to play in the Greater Bay Area Cup in Guangdong. And by that, we were invited Macao team and also the mainland 9 cities to play together. By doing that, we can use sports and football to promote greater interaction between the youth in the Greater Bay Area. And through this experience, not just by having the football game, they were able to understand the cultural difference, understand about the city of Guangzhou, and also understand the so-called cultural, historical, cultural history of the area, and also some of the career opportunities.
Right.
And more on the more professional level, in terms of Hong Kong Football Association level, I think Hong Kong is a very unique place with its a Hong Kong Football League and our Hong Kong football team, as we are also just about to get ready for the World Cup qualifier right now in Bahrain. But in the bigger level, we would very much like to be part of the Chinese market, where we can, with that, we can attract more commercial sponsors. And by having that, we can help Hong Kong coaches, our Hong Kong players to increase their wage and increase better talent. So by that, we can help the employment of the sports industry in Hong Kong. In 2023, Hong Kong will have the Kai Tak Sports Park ready. That will be a 50,000 stadium, and this will be also something that the sports community will be rallying behind. And we very much hope to attract more international games, including local games, and also games that is from the Greater Bay Area to host the final in Hong Kong, in Kai Tak. So I think there will be many interaction in terms of the amateur level, youth level, professional level in terms of league and practice, and lastly for football fans to enjoy world-class facility and matches, whether you're in Hong Kong or in the Greater Bay Area.
Yeah. So under the pandemic we are all having now, is there any things that will be being held up to encourage people to go into the Greater Bay Area for tournaments or for competitions or for interactions?
I think the pandemic has actually become a disruptor in the industry, not just for football or sports, but in all industries. But this disruption has actually speeded up a lot of industries at the same time. Some of the traditional industry may be so-called challenge, but when there's challenge, there's also always opportunity. And what is the opportunity from this pandemic that I see in the world of sports is it speeded up the world of esports.
Yes, that's why I'm asking the question.
So I know that Eunice has also been very involved in esports, and I think that in the sporting industry, I think that this is something that I've been pursuing and pushing, and I think lately we are getting a lot of good news. Esports will become medal sports in Asian Games coming up in Hangzhou.
Right.
And lastly is the IOC, International Olympic Committee, which is the world governing body for Olympics, has recognized esports, and they're going to launch the Olympic virtual series, starting with a couple of traditional sports. So I think that in the world of esports, this is very exciting, and I can only see this market growing. And going forward, hopefully Hong Kong can play a role, and we can get the government, the private sector, and the sports community to all rally behind this, so that we have a bright future for the youth.
So are we looking that our team, our Hong Kong team, Hong Kong football esports team, is able to participate in the 2022 Asian Games in Hangzhou?
Right now, I mean, I think that we want to create more opportunity. So as a Hong Kong FA, we are there to support them in terms of hopefully helping them organize more tournaments, so that there are more chances to play. We give them a support system so that they have a stable environment, so that they can turn this into a career path rather than a part-time job. Thirdly is also to bring in so-called better coaches, so that we can groom the industry. So that right now we have 5 talented e-football players representing Hong Kong. This is the first generation. And we can definitely see the market expanding. But what Hong Kong's got to do is, I think we have to so-called attract more talent, so that more youth get involved. And so this will become the new trend, I believe. So I personally is very confident and very excited, because many international sports we are quite far behind. But in terms of something like this kind of new sports or esports, I believe that we are more all on the same level playing ground. So with good so-called policies and good environment for them to be trained, I believe Hong Kong has a big chance on the world stage.
Yes, Eric, as you have mentioned, in 2022, the Asian Games, esports is going to be an official medal event.
Right.
However, most Asian families and parents think that esports means internet gaming and it means unhealthy addiction. How are you going to convince them to change their mindset and to allow their children to take part in the esports training and to nurture these talents?
Well, that's a good question. But for myself, I think of it the other way around. I think of it as parents should encourage their children to live their dream. This is how I see it.
Right.
And if the children is interested in something and they want to pursue a dream, a lot of parents are very willing to so-called encourage them. But more importantly, the parents look at it as, if you're going to pursue this, I hope you can have a long-term stable career out of it. And I think that's what we need to look at, rather than looking at it as a simple good or bad.
Right.
So I think that recently, actually, Baptist University just came out with an independent survey and said that they did many interviews and so-called questionnaires, that actually 72% of the Hong Kong youth supports esports. So this shows that under the current environment, society supports esport. And what you mentioned could be the old way of thinking.
Right.
And I'm sure there's anything you do, there's different voices. I think the role for government, the role for Olympic Committee, the role for the Esports Association is actually to educate more. Because I think that it's like the internet, or even look at the new trends. You can't stop the trend, but you can so-called educate the trend so that people have better understanding of it.
Right.
So with that said, I think the same applies for esports, where I think numbers, statistic-wise, everyone knows it's one of the fastest growing trend in current environment right now, and you cannot stop it. But what we can do together with society and government and association is that we can educate the public better.
Right.
And by understanding what is esport, how can we pursue a better path for the youth to pursue esport? So I think that what we have to look at is actually better education, and then going forward we can create a esports hub, and actually it's not just about the players itself. and it's actually a whole incubation hub, and there's a whole industry behind it. And I think that is what is exciting about esports.
Yes.
So Eric, you know that presidency always encourage youth to study, to work, and to live in the Greater Bay Area.
Right.
As I know that you have much of the experience living and working and staying in Greater Bay Area. So how would you recommend us? What should we do before we go to the Greater Bay Areas? How are we going to prepare for ourselves?
I think for myself, you know, I think like some of the Hong Kong people, being Chinese, born in Hong Kong, I had the privilege of studying abroad and then returning back and working and living in China. So I have some kind of comparison. I think, you know, as Hong Kong people, we can adopt very well in different environment, but the most important is to experience yourself, I think. Because I think you may hear different stories and different versions from different people, but I think everyone has different interests and different background. So I would always encourage people to experience for themselves, because for myself, I'm also the chairman of the Hong Kong Guangdong Youth Association. So we try to facilitate Hong Kong youth to understand better on the Greater Bay Area. And often they ask me is, why should I go? And if I go, which city should I go? And you know, so I think for me, my motto has always been first understand, and then you make your decision, rather than just go blindly. Whether it's pursuing career or going to a foreign country or going to a mainland city.
Right.
I know recently the Hong Kong government has just launched the Greater Bay Area Youth Employment Scheme, and I know that that was been received very good, and many people have signed up for it. And I think, and government gives a subsidy to the company that employs the Hong Kong youth. And I think these are great schemes that really gives Hong Kong youth a chance to have first-hand experience in the Greater Bay Area. I think that what's important is actually from our survey, we see that there's a direct correlation is if the Hong Kong youth has any interaction or experience in mainland, they're more likely to pursue a career in the mainland. And secondly is that the longer they have experience in the mainland, the more likely they'll pursue a career or live in the mainland. So it's very important for them to have a chance, and that chance, if they have a longer time in the mainland, will have a positive effect.
Right.
So I think with that said, we've made a number of recommendations based on what I just said. But I think one area that can increase or encourage this interaction is through universities, because Hong Kong has a very unique one country, two system. So a lot of the licenses are not recognized. So I think these are one of the difficulties that people face.
Right.
And so now as the Greater Bay Area policy comes down, a lot of the licenses in Hong Kong are recognized in the Greater Bay Area.
Right.
So with that said, I think we can see that a number of universities, Hong Kong universities, are opening across the border. And one prime example is the Hong Kong Science and Technology University that's opening in Guangzhou, which is right next to the Guangzhou high-speed rail station, to facilitate Hong Kong people getting there. And so this will be open in 2 years' time. So with that said, that will encourage Hong Kong students, mainland students, and international students to be all going to make Greater Bay Area. But with that said, I would like to make a suggestion, and one area that I think we can increase this is by having Hong Kong youth study in Hong Kong, perhaps in the Hong Kong Science and Technology University, and then in the Guangzhou campus, they can do exchange programs. So because I think it's hard for some people to just sign up a 3-year course and go to the mainland and live there. But if you actually enroll in Hong Kong and you have 1 semester in the Greater Bay Area, Guangzhou, and 1 semester in Hong Kong, and vice versa, I think it's also important for mainland students to understand Hong Kong. It's not just about us understanding them. I think understanding is a mutual understanding. And when you understand each other, you respect each other. And by doing this, you will have more harmony between the two. And this is the idea of Greater Bay Area, where the 9+2 people come together as one. So I believe that going forward, there's going to be more initiation.
So we've learned a lot about the football industry, the esports, and also the Greater Bay Area. And as what you have said, we wish that the younger generation can take a step forward and go to the Greater Bay Area mainland cities and
see it for themselves.
Yes, and explore more opportunities. So thank you very much, Eric.
Not at all. Thank you for your time and thank you for inviting me here
Thank
today.
you.
Thank you very much.